There's something strange that happens when a film like Gladiator II finally steps out of the shadows. Because for years, this wasn't just a sequel, it was a question mark. A dangerous one. The kind that sits in the back of your mind every time Hollywood decides to revisit something that already felt complete. And I'll be honest, I went into that first trailer with a mix of curiosity and quiet skepticism. Because how do you follow that ending? You remember the feeling. The dust settling in the Colosseum, the silence after Maximus falls, the sense that the story had already said everything it needed to say. So when I pressed play on this new footage, I wasn't looking for spectacle first. I was looking for intent. Why does this story exist? And right away, the trailer doesn't ease you in. It throws you straight back into a Rome that feels familiar, but not comfortable. There's a colder edge to it now. Less honor, more calculation. You can feel it in the way the camera lingers, not on glory, but on power shifting hands. Then you see him, Paul Mescal. And I'll admit, if you only knew him from quieter, more intimate roles, this might catch you off guard. There's something restrained about his presence here. Not loud, not traditionally heroic in that old school sword and sandal way. But that's exactly what makes it interesting. He doesn't enter like a legend. He enters like someone carrying history he didn't ask for. The trailer is very careful with how it frames him too. You don't get a full sense of his character immediately. Instead, you get fragments, glances, moments of tension, flashes of vulnerability buried under something harder. It's almost like the film is daring you to compare him to Maximus, and then quietly asking you not to. And then the scale starts to build. Ships cutting through water like war machines. Crowds roaring in arenas that feel even more unforgiving than before. There's a sequence, just a few seconds long, where the arena itself feels transformed, almost theatrical in a darker, more engineered way. It's not just about combat anymore, it's about spectacle as control. That's where the tone shifts. Because when Denzel Washington shows up, the entire energy of the trailer changes. And not in a subtle way. He's not playing a warrior here. He's something else entirely. Calculated, composed, almost amused by the chaos around him. You get the sense that while others fight in the arena, he owns the idea of it. There's a line, delivered with that unmistakable calm intensity, that suggests he's not just part of the system. He understands it, manipulates it, maybe even built his own version of it. And suddenly, the film doesn't feel like a revenge story anymore. It feels like a chessboard. Now layer in Pedro Pascal and things get even more interesting. Because Pascal brings a completely different kind of weight. There's a grounded toughness to him, but also this underlying weariness, like someone who's seen too much, survived too long, and isn't entirely sure what side he's on anymore. The trailer uses him sparingly, but effectively. You catch glimpses of conflict, not just physical, but internal. And those quick cuts suggest that his relationship with Mescal's character isn't going to be simple. It's not mentor, not enemy, something messier than that. And that's really the key word here, messy. Because unlike the original film, which had a very clear emotional spine, this one feels intentionally more complicated. The trailer doesn't hand you a straightforward narrative. It gives you tension, layers, unanswered questions. And honestly, that's a risky move. But it's also the only way a sequel like this can justify itself. Visually, though, it's undeniable. The scale is massive, but it doesn't feel empty. There's texture in everything. The armor looks worn, the environments feel lived in. The crowds don't just exist as background noise. There's a weight to the world. You can almost feel the heat, the dust, the pressure of thousands of eyes watching every move. And yet, for all its size, the trailer keeps pulling you back to faces. Close-ups, small moments, a look held just a second too long, a breath before a fight. It's like the film is constantly reminding you that beneath all the spectacle, this is still about people, about choices, about consequences. There's also something else going on beneath the surface that I didn't expect. A kind of quiet reflection on legacy, not in an obvious, heavy-handed way, but in the way characters are framed against the past. In the way certain shots echo imagery from the original film without directly copying it. It's subtle, but it's there. This sense that history isn't just something that happened, it's something that keeps shaping the present, whether you want it to or not. And that's where the trailer becomes more than just a preview. It starts to feel like a statement. That this isn't trying to replace what came before. It's trying to wrestle with it, question it, maybe even challenge the idea that stories like this can ever truly end. By the time the music swells, and yes, it leans into that familiar, haunting tone, you realize something kind of unexpected. You're not comparing it anymore. You're leaning in, trying to figure out what this version of Rome has to say. Because it's not the same world. It's harsher, more political, more aware of its own machinery. And that makes every moment of violence feel less like heroism and more like strategy. Even the action, from what little we see, feels different. It's not just about strength or skill. There's an emphasis on positioning, timing, control. Fights aren't just fought, they're orchestrated. And that ties back to that central idea the trailer keeps hinting at. Power isn't in the arena, it's around it, above it, behind it. So when the final shots hit, and you see glimpses of what looks like larger conflicts building beyond the Colosseum, it leaves you with this lingering question. Not who will win, but who's really pulling the strings? And more importantly, whether anyone in this world actually has a choice. And that question just kind of lingers in your head as the screen fades out. Because the more I sat with that trailer, the more it felt like it wasn't trying to sell me a story as much as it was inviting me into a system, one that's already in motion long before we arrive, and probably won't stop when we leave. So when the film actually opens, it doesn't rush to explain itself. It trusts you to feel your way through it. You're dropped into a Rome that's still recognizable, but there's a quiet rot beneath everything now. The grandeur is intact, sure, the marble, the banners, the rituals, but there's this underlying tension, like something is slightly off in every frame. And what really stood out to me early on is how patient the film is with its main character. Paul Mescal doesn't get a big, triumphant introduction. There's no dramatic reveal designed to make you immediately cheer for him. Instead, you meet him in a moment that feels almost ordinary, given the circumstances. But there's a heaviness to him. You can tell right away this is someone shaped by things we haven't fully seen yet. And the film leans into that mystery. It doesn't rush to tell you who he is in relation to the past. It lets you notice things, the way others look at him, the way he reacts to certain names, certain places. There's a restraint there that I really appreciated, because it gives the character room to breathe before the story starts pulling him in different directions. Meanwhile, the world around him is anything but quiet. You start to see how power is functioning in this version of Rome, and it's not stable, not even close. There's a sense that the empire is being held together by competing forces, each one trying to outmaneuver the other without triggering outright collapse. It's less about dominance now and more about control through influence. That's where Denzel Washington really begins to reveal what he's doing in this film. Because his character doesn't operate in the open, not really. He's always just slightly removed from the chaos, observing it, nudging it, shaping outcomes without ever needing to draw a sword himself. And Denzel plays that with this almost unsettling calm. There's a confidence there that doesn't come from strength. It comes from understanding how people work. You watch him in a scene, just a conversation, nothing explosive, and you realize he's already 10 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. And the scary part is, he doesn't even seem rushed, like he knows time is on his side. Then there's Pedro Pascal, who enters the narrative in a way that immediately grounds everything again. Because while Denzel's character feels almost abstract in his control, Pascal's feels very real, physical, present. You can sense the weight of his past decisions in the way he carries himself. He's not just another soldier or authority figure. He's someone who's had to survive within this system, and maybe compromise more than he wanted to. There's a moment early on, subtle, easy to miss, where you see him hesitate before giving an order, and it tells you everything. This isn't a man who enjoys what he does, but he does it anyway. And that dynamic starts to pull the story into something much more layered than I expected. Because at its core, this isn't just about one man rising through the ranks or seeking revenge. It's about how different people navigate the same broken system in completely different ways. Some manipulate it, some enforce it, some get crushed by it. And Mescal's character, he's kind of caught in between all of that. There's a turning point, not a big, explosive one, but a quiet shift, where you realize he's no longer just reacting to what's happening around him. He's starting to make choices, risky ones, the kind that don't guarantee survival. And the film takes its time getting there, which I think is crucial. Because by the time he steps into the arena, not as spectacle, but as participant, you understand what it means. Not just physically, but psychologically. The arena itself feels different this time around too. It's bigger, yes, more elaborate, but also more calculated. There's an intentionality to how events unfold there, like it's less about spontaneous combat and more about curated violence, designed outcomes. You start to see how the games are being used not just for entertainment, but as a tool, a message. And that ties everything back to that idea the trailer hinted at. Power doesn't live in the fight, it lives in who decides the fight. There's a sequence, again, I won't spoil specifics, but it involves a staged confrontation that doesn't go the way anyone expects. And the fallout from that moment ripples through the rest of the story in ways that feel earned, not forced. What I found myself really drawn to is how the film doesn't try to recreate the emotional beats of the original. It doesn't chase that same sense of righteous clarity. Instead, it leans into ambiguity, into moral gray areas. You're not always sure who you're supposed to root for, and more importantly, the film doesn't seem interested in giving you that answer. Even the relationships reflect that uncertainty. The interactions between Mescal and Pascal, for example, are layered with tension that shifts from scene to scene. Sometimes it feels like mutual respect. Other times it feels like inevitable conflict. And the film allows both to exist at the same time, which makes every interaction unpredictable. And then there's the broader world beyond Rome itself. You start to get glimpses of how the Empire's reach is affecting distant regions, how its influence is both expanding and weakening simultaneously. It adds this larger context that makes the central story feel like part of something bigger, not just an isolated narrative. And yet, despite all that scale, the film keeps circling back to individual choices, small moments, a decision to speak or stay silent, to act or hesitate, to trust or betray. And those moments carry weight because the film has taken the time to build them up. By the time the first major turning point hits, where alliances begin to shift and the true stakes start to come into focus, you realize you're not just watching events unfold. You're watching consequences collide. And it's messy. Intentionally so, because nothing resolves cleanly here. Every move creates new problems. Every victory feels temporary. Every loss lingers. And that's what keeps pulling you forward. Not the promise of triumph, but the uncertainty of what it's all building toward. And that uncertainty starts to tighten its grip the deeper the story pulls you in. Because right around this point, you can feel the film shifting from observation into momentum. Not in a loud, explosive way, but in that subtle, almost unsettling sense that pieces are sliding into place whether anyone's ready or not. What really struck me here is how the film begins to blur the line between survival and strategy. Up until now, Paul Mescal's character has been reacting, adapting to situations, navigating danger as it comes. But there's a moment, and it's quiet, almost easy to overlook, where you realize he's no longer just trying to make it through the day. He's thinking ahead, anticipating outcomes, starting to understand the rules of a game he never asked to play. And the thing is, those rules aren't written anywhere. They're felt. In glances exchanged across crowded rooms, in the way certain names carry weight while others disappear without consequence, in who gets to speak and who doesn't. That's where the film becomes really fascinating because it doesn't explain this system to you directly. It lets you absorb it through behavior, through patterns, through repetition of power dynamics that slowly start to make sense the more you watch. Meanwhile, Denzel Washington's presence becomes even more pronounced. Not because he's doing more, but because you're starting to understand what he's already done. There's a scene, again, no specifics, but it revolves around a decision that seems minor at first. a shift in positioning, a reallocation of attention. And somehow, that one move creates a chain reaction that affects multiple characters at once. That's when it clicks. He's not reacting to events, he's designing them. And Denzel plays this with such control that it almost feels like he's operating in a different genre than everyone else. While others are caught in emotion, anger, fear, loyalty, he's working with something colder, intent, precision, a long view that stretches far beyond the immediate moment. But what makes it even more compelling is that the film doesn't present him as untouchable. There are cracks. Tiny ones, but they're there. Moments where something doesn't go exactly as planned, where a variable slips through his fingers. And instead of overreacting, he adjusts, recalculates, which somehow makes him even more dangerous, because you realize he doesn't need control over everything, just enough. Then you have Pedro Pascal, whose storyline starts to intersect more directly with Mescal's in ways that feel inevitable rather than forced. Their dynamic evolves here. There's still tension, still that underlying question of where loyalties lie, but there's also a growing awareness between them, a recognition that they're both navigating the same unstable ground, just from different positions. And what I appreciated is that the film doesn't rush their connection. It lets it build through small interactions, shared silences, moments where words aren't necessary because the situation says everything. And when conflict does arise between them, it feels earned. Not because the plot demands it, but because their paths were always going to collide eventually. The arena sequences around this point also take on a new meaning. Earlier, they felt like controlled spectacles, events designed to send messages from those in power. But now, they start to feel unpredictable. Not chaotic exactly, but less contained. Like the system itself is starting to strain under the weight of its own manipulation. There's one sequence that stands out, not for its scale, but for its shift in tone. What begins as a familiar setup slowly unravels into something else entirely. You can sense it in the pacing, in the reactions of the crowd, in the way the camera stops focusing on the expected outcome and instead lingers on the unexpected consequences. And in that moment, the arena stops being just a stage. It becomes a reflection of everything happening outside it. Power struggling to maintain control, individuals pushing against roles they've been assigned, a system revealing its flaws in real time. And Mescal's character, right at the center of it, starts to realize something crucial. That surviving within this structure might not be enough anymore. That maybe the only way forward is to disrupt it. But disruption comes with a cost. And the film doesn't shy away from that. Every decision he makes from here on carries weight, not just for him, but for the people around him. Allies become uncertain, enemies become complicated, lines blur in ways that make it harder and harder to define what winning even looks like. There's also a growing sense of history catching up with the present, not in a nostalgic way, but in a confrontational one. The legacy of what came before isn't just lingering, it's pressing in, influencing perceptions, shaping expectations, and in some cases, limiting possibilities. You see it in how certain characters react to symbols, to names, to echoes of the past that refuse to stay buried. And it creates this tension between honoring what was and breaking away from it. Which brings everything back to that central idea the film keeps circling, choice, or the illusion of it. Because as the story moves toward its midpoint, you start to question how much control any of these characters really have, whether they're making decisions or simply playing roles that were set in motion long before they arrived. And that question doesn't get answered, it just gets heavier, more complicated, more urgent. By the time the second major shift hits, where the balance of power starts to tilt in a way that no one can fully predict, you're no longer watching for resolution, you're watching for impact. For the moment where all these threads, political, personal, historical, collide in a way that forces change. And the film is very deliberate about how it builds to that. It doesn't rush, it doesn't over-explain. It trusts that you're paying attention, that you're connecting the dots. And when those connections finally start to form, it's not a clean picture. It's fractured, tense, unstable. But that's exactly what makes it compelling. Because at this point, anything feels possible. Not in a hopeful sense, but in a way that keeps you leaning forward, trying to understand what kind of ending a story like this is even heading toward. And the deeper you get into that tension, the more the film starts to feel like it's tightening a knot rather than building towards something cleanly structured. Because right around here, everything that's been simmering finally begins to press against itself in a way that can't be contained anymore. It's not explosive at first, it's pressure. You feel it in conversations that used to feel controlled, but now carry an edge. In glances that linger a little too long, like everyone's trying to read intentions before making a move. There's this growing awareness among the characters that whatever balance once existed, it's slipping. And Paul Mescal's character is right in the middle of that shift, whether he wants to be or not. What's interesting is how the film handles his evolution at this stage. It doesn't suddenly turn him into some commanding figure who has all the answers. If anything, it does the opposite. It lets him struggle with the weight of what he's becoming. There are moments where you can see hesitation creep in. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Recognition that every step forward closes off other paths. That every choice narrows the future instead of opening it up. And that's such a grounded way to handle a character in a story like this. Because instead of building him into a symbol, the film keeps pulling him back into being human, flawed, uncertain, a product of everything that's happened to him, rather than some idealized version of what he should be. Meanwhile, Denzel Washington's influence starts to reach a kind of peak, not in terms of dominance, but in visibility. You begin to see just how far his reach extends, how many pieces he's been moving without drawing attention to himself, and more importantly, how fragile that control actually is. Because systems like the one he's built, or operates within, they rely on predictability, on people behaving in expected ways. And as soon as someone steps outside of that pattern, even slightly, it creates instability. That's where Mescal's character becomes a problem. Not because he's the strongest or the smartest, but because he's becoming unpredictable. And unpredictability, in a system built on manipulation, is dangerous. There's a sequence here that really captures that shift, less about physical action and more about psychological movement. A series of decisions made almost simultaneously by different characters, each one based on incomplete information. And watching it unfold, you can feel the tension not from what's happening, but from what might happen next. Because no one is fully in control anymore, not even the people who think they are. At the same time, Pedro Pascal's arc takes a turn that adds another layer to everything. Up until now, he's been navigating that line between duty and personal conflict. But here, that line starts to disappear. Not because he's made a clear choice, but because circumstances force him into positions where neutrality isn't possible anymore. And Pascal plays this beautifully. There's a weariness in him that deepens, but it's not passive, it's active. You can see him calculating, weighing options, understanding consequences in real time. And when he finally acts, when he commits to a direction, it doesn't feel like a dramatic pivot. It feels inevitable, like something that's been building beneath the surface, finally breaking through. And what I really appreciate is how the film allows these three central performances to intersect without one overshadowing the others. Each of them represents a different way of navigating power. Mescal, uncertain, evolving, reactive, turning into intentional. Denzel, controlled, strategic, shaping outcomes from a distance. Pascal, grounded, conflicted, caught between structure and conscience. And when those approaches collide, it doesn't resolve neatly. It complicates everything. The arena sequences around this point reflect that complexity too. They're no longer just events within the story, they're expressions of it. What happens inside the arena begins to mirror what's happening outside, but in a more concentrated, almost symbolic way. Alliances shift mid-conflict. Expectations get subverted. Outcomes feel less predetermined. There's one moment, again without giving too much away, where the crowd's reaction becomes just as important as the action itself. Where you realize that perception is part of the battle. Not just who wins, but how it's seen, how it's interpreted, and who controls that narrative afterward. That idea ties back into the larger themes the film's been exploring from the beginning. Power not as force, but as influence, as control over meaning, over story. And that becomes especially important as the consequences of earlier decisions start to come into play. Because nothing in this film just disappears. Every action leaves a mark. Every choice creates ripples. And by the time those ripples start to intersect, you get this sense of inevitability. Not in terms of outcome, but in terms of confrontation. Things can't stay as they are. They won't. The film makes that clear without ever needing to state it outright. You feel it in the pacing, in the performances, in the way scenes transition from one to another with this underlying tension that never quite releases. And as it all builds toward what feels like a critical turning point, where the direction of the story could shift in multiple ways, you realize something important. This isn't a story about restoring order. It's about what happens when order breaks down. When the systems that once held everything together start to fracture under the weight of their own contradictions. And in that space, where nothing is stable and everything is in flux, that's where the characters have to decide who they really are. Not in theory, but in action. In choices that can't be undone. In moments that define not just their survival, but their place in whatever comes next. And it's right in that unstable space, where nothing quite holds the way it used to, that the film starts leaning into its final stretch of storytelling in a way that feels less like escalation and more like convergence. Because all those threads we've been following separately, all those quiet tensions and carefully placed decisions, they don't explode outward. They pull inward. You can feel it happening before it fully arrives. Scenes get tighter. Conversations become shorter but heavier. There's less room for posturing, less patience for performance. People stop pretending they have time. And Paul Mescal's character at this point is no longer trying to figure out where he fits within the system. He's confronting it. Not in some grand, declarative way, but through action, through presence, through a refusal to keep playing by rules that were never designed to serve him in the first place. And what's compelling is that the film doesn't frame this as a heroic awakening. It feels more like a necessity. Like he's reached a point where doing nothing is no longer an option, even if doing something comes with consequences he can't fully control. There's a weight to that kind of decision-making that the film handles really well. It doesn't rush past it. It lingers just long enough for you to feel the cost before the action unfolds. At the same time, Denzel Washington's character begins to experience something rare for him throughout the story: resistance that doesn't behave predictably. Up until now, every obstacle has been something he could anticipate, redirect, or absorb into his larger strategy. But here, things start slipping outside those boundaries. And it's subtle at first. A plan that doesn't land exactly as expected. A reaction that doesn't follow the usual pattern. But those small deviations start to accumulate, and for the first time, you sense a shift in his control. Not a loss of power, but a challenge to its certainty. And Denzel plays this shift with incredible restraint. He doesn't suddenly become frantic or visibly shaken. Instead, there's a recalibration, a slight tightening in his expression, a pause where there wasn't one before. It's the kind of performance detail that tells you everything without needing to underline it. Because for someone like him, uncertainty isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. Then there's Pedro Pascal, whose path finally intersects with both of them in a way that feels unavoidable. And what I found really effective here is how the film resists turning that intersection into a simple clash of sides. It's not about good versus bad. It's about conflicting perspectives shaped by different experiences within the same broken system. When these characters come face to face, whether physically or through the consequences of their actions, you can feel the weight of everything that's led them there. Nothing feels random. Nothing feels like it's happening just for the sake of drama. It all carries history, and that history complicates every interaction. The arena, once again, becomes a central space for this convergence, but it doesn't feel like the same arena we saw earlier in the film. There's a shift in how it's used. It's less controlled, less theatrical, more exposed. Almost like the illusion that once surrounded it has been stripped away. And what remains is something rawer, more honest, more dangerous. There's a sequence, one that clearly serves as a major turning point, where everything the film has been building toward comes into focus at once. Not through a single event, but through a combination of actions happening simultaneously. And what makes it work is the way the film trusts the audience to hold all those pieces together. It doesn't over-explain, it doesn't simplify, it lets the complexity exist. So as you're watching, you're not just following one thread. You're tracking multiple trajectories, all moving toward a shared moment of impact. And when that impact hits, it doesn't resolve things, it fractures them further, which, honestly, feels true to the kind of story this is trying to tell. Because by now, it's clear that this isn't about restoring balance or achieving some kind of clean victory. It's about transformation, messy, unpredictable, and incomplete. And that idea carries through the final movements of the narrative. Characters don't get neat conclusions. They get consequences. Some expected, some not. And in the aftermath of those consequences, you start to see what's actually been at stake this whole time. Not just power in the traditional sense, but influence, legacy, the ability to shape what comes next. And that brings everything back, in a quiet way, to the shadow of what came before. Because even without directly referencing it, the film understands that it exists in conversation with the past, with expectations, with memory. And instead of trying to replicate that, it chooses to respond to it, to question it, to build something alongside it rather than on top of it. By the time the story reaches its closing moments, there's a sense of completion, but not in the way you might expect. It doesn't tie everything up. It doesn't answer every question. Instead, it leaves space for interpretation, for continuation, for the idea that history doesn't end, it evolves. And in that final stretch, as the dust settles in a way that feels both familiar and entirely different, you're left not with certainty, but with reflection about what power really looks like, about what it costs, and about whether anyone who seeks it ever truly escapes its consequences. When people first hear about Gladiator II, the immediate curiosity isn't just about the story, it's about who carries it. Because a film like this doesn't survive on spectacle alone. It needs faces that can hold weight, actors who don't just perform, but embody the tension of a world built on power, legacy, and survival. And honestly, the casting here is one of the most interesting parts of the entire project. Let's start with Paul Mescal, because everything ultimately revolves around him. Mescal stepping into a film like this is a fascinating choice when you think about where he comes from as an actor. He didn't rise through big franchise blockbusters or action-heavy roles. His reputation was built on emotional precision, on performances that feel internal rather than explosive. If you've seen his earlier work, you know he has this ability to communicate a character's entire inner life through the smallest shifts in expression. That's not something you typically associate with a gladiator-style epic, which is exactly why it works. In this film, he plays a character tied to the legacy of Rome itself, a man shaped by history, rather than one trying to create it from scratch. And Mescal leans into that complexity instead of trying to imitate the kind of commanding presence we saw in the original film. His strength doesn't come from dominance, it comes from restraint. From the sense that he's constantly processing, constantly adapting, constantly aware of forces larger than himself. Physically, he had to transform for the role. Reports around the production made it clear that he underwent intense training, not just to look the part, but to move like someone who has lived through conflict. And you can feel that in the way he carries himself. There's weight in his posture, a grounded energy that makes his presence believable in a world where survival depends on both physical and mental endurance. But what really defines his performance is vulnerability. Even in moments where he's forced into violence, there's an awareness behind his actions. You never get the sense that he's enjoying power. If anything, he seems wary of it. And that creates a completely different kind of protagonist, one who feels modern in his psychology, even within an ancient setting. Now, shifting to Denzel Washington, the dynamic changes entirely. Denzel doesn't just enter a film, he reorients it. His presence alone brings a level of authority that few actors can match. And here, He channels that into a character who operates on intelligence rather than brute force. He's not defined by physical dominance. Instead, he's defined by awareness, strategy, control. What makes his role so compelling is how layered it feels. On the surface, he's composed, almost detached. But beneath that calm exterior, there's constant calculation happening. Every line delivery feels intentional, every pause measured. It's the kind of performance where you get the sense that the character is always thinking 3 steps ahead, even when he's standing still. Denzel has played powerful figures before, but this role feels different because it's not about overt authority. It's about influence. He doesn't need to raise his voice to command attention. He doesn't need to prove his strength physically. His power comes from understanding people, from knowing how to position himself in a way that others end up doing the work for him. And what's especially interesting is how he interacts with the rest of the cast. He doesn't overpower scenes in an obvious way. Instead, he draws others into his rhythm. Conversations with him feel like negotiations, even when they're not framed that way. There's always something unspoken beneath the surface, and Denzel uses that to create tension without ever pushing too hard. Then you have Pedro Pascal, who brings yet another dimension to the film. Pascal has built a career on characters who exist in morally complicated spaces. He's incredibly good at playing men who are trying to do the right thing while operating within systems that make that nearly impossible. And that skill set fits perfectly here. His character carries a sense of history, personal, emotional, and political. You can feel that he's been part of this world long before the events of the film, and that experience shapes everything about him. There's a weariness in his performance, but it's not passive. It's active, like someone who's constantly weighing options, constantly aware of the consequences tied to every decision. Physically, Pascal brings a grounded toughness. He feels like someone who has survived battles, not just fought them. But what makes his performance stand out is the internal conflict. You can see it in the way he hesitates, in the way he reacts to certain situations. He's not blindly loyal, but he's not fully rebellious either. He exists in that gray area where survival often requires compromise. And when his character intersects with Mescal's, there's a natural tension that doesn't need to be forced. It comes from their differences in perspective. Mescal's character is still figuring out the system, while Pascal's understands it deeply. That contrast creates moments that feel layered and unpredictable. Another key presence in the film is Connie Nielsen, returning to a role that connects this story directly to the past. Her character carries the emotional continuity of the world. While the film introduces new dynamics and new conflicts, she represents memory, what Rome was, what it became, and what it lost along the way. Nielsen plays this with a quiet strength. She doesn't dominate scenes with volume or intensity. Instead, she brings a sense of reflection, of someone who has witnessed the rise and fall of power from a deeply personal perspective. Her interactions with the newer characters add depth because they're rooted in experience. She's not reacting to events in the same way. They're part of a larger pattern she's already seen before. That gives her presence a kind of gravity that anchors the film, especially when the story starts to expand into more chaotic territory. Then there's Joseph Quinn, who brings a different kind of energy into the mix. Quinn's role leans more toward unpredictability. There's an edge to his performance that keeps you slightly off balance. You're never entirely sure how his character will respond in any given moment, and that uncertainty adds tension to the scenes he's part of. He doesn't play things in a straightforward way. There's a theatrical quality to his presence, but it never feels out of place within the world of the film. Instead, it highlights the instability of the environment. His character feels like someone shaped by privilege and pressure at the same time, which creates a volatile combination. And that volatility becomes important as the story unfolds, because it introduces an element that can't be easily controlled or predicted. Looking at the cast as a whole, what stands out is how intentionally balanced it feels. You have Mescal representing a more introspective, evolving protagonist, Denzel embodying calculated power and strategic influence, Pascal grounding the story in lived experience and moral conflict, Nielsen connecting everything to a deeper emotional and historical context. Quinn injecting unpredictability and tension into the system. Each performance operates on a different wavelength, but they all intersect in ways that feel organic rather than forced. And that's crucial for a film like this, because it's not just about individual characters. It's about how those characters exist within a shared structure of power and consequence. What really makes this cast work is that no one is playing a simple role. There are no clear-cut heroes or villains in the traditional sense. Instead, you get individuals shaped by their circumstances, making decisions based on incomplete information, navigating a world where every choice carries weight. And that complexity is what gives the film its depth. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about who these characters are. It's about how they change, how they influence each other, and how they respond when the system they exist within starts to shift. That's where the performances come together. Not as separate pieces, but as parts of something larger, something unstable, something constantly evolving, and something that feels, in its own way, very real. What makes this ensemble even more compelling, the longer you sit with it, is how each actor seems to be playing a slightly different kind of movie. And somehow, it all still fits together without feeling disjointed. Take Fred Hechinger, for example. His presence adds a very specific kind of energy to the film, one that leans into instability, but not in an obvious, over-the-top way. There's something unsettling about how he approaches his character. It's not loud chaos, it's controlled unpredictability, the kind where you're never quite sure whether he's aware of the impact he's having, or if that uncertainty is exactly the point. Hechinger has this ability to make even simple dialogue feel loaded, like there's something just beneath the surface that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And in a film where so much revolves around control and perception, that quality becomes incredibly valuable. His character doesn't just exist within the system, he disrupts it in subtle ways, often without needing to take direct action. Then you have Lior Raz, who brings a completely different kind of grounded intensity. Raz is known for roles that rely heavily on physical presence and emotional realism, and you can feel that here. His character feels like someone who has lived through conflict rather than simply representing it. There's a rawness to his performance, something unpolished and immediate, that contrasts nicely with the more calculated characters around him. He doesn't overplay moments. In fact, some of his most effective scenes come from what he doesn't say. The way he observes, the way he reacts, the way he holds tension in silence. It creates this sense that his character is always aware of danger, always prepared for things to shift without warning. And that awareness feeds into the larger atmosphere of the film, where stability is never guaranteed. Another interesting addition is Derek Jacobi, whose involvement brings a sense of continuity and classical weight. Jacobi has a long history with historical and Shakespearean material, and that experience shows in the way he carries himself here. There's a formality to his presence, but it never feels stiff. Instead, it adds texture to the world. He feels like someone who understands the traditions of Rome, not just politically, but culturally. His performance leans into nuance rather than dominance. He's not there to command attention in an obvious way. Instead, he adds depth to the environment, reinforcing the idea that this world existed long before the main conflict and will continue to exist after it. Then there's May Calamawy, who introduces a different emotional tone into the narrative. Her presence brings a level of empathy and humanity that balances out some of the harsher elements of the story. While many characters are navigating power structures and survival strategies, her role feels more connected to the emotional consequences of those systems. Calamawy has a natural ability to make her performances feel grounded and sincere, and that translates well here. She doesn't need dramatic scenes to leave an impact. Instead, it's the quieter moments, the way she listens, the way she responds, that create a lasting impression. Her interactions with other characters often reveal sides of them that might not come out in more confrontational settings. And that adds another layer to the film's exploration of identity and choice. Looking at the cast collectively, what becomes clear is that this isn't a group assembled purely for star power. It's a group built around contrast, different acting styles, different energies, different approaches to character. And instead of clashing, those differences actually enhance the story. Because the film itself is about imbalance, about systems that don't function smoothly, about people operating with different motivations and levels of understanding. So having a cast that reflects that variety makes the world feel more authentic. Even in smaller roles, you can see that intention. Background characters don't feel like placeholders. They feel like individuals with their own perspectives, their own positions within the larger structure. And that attention to detail helps build a world that feels lived in rather than constructed. Another aspect worth mentioning is how the cast interacts physically within the space. This isn't just about dialogue, it's about presence, movement, positioning. You can tell that a lot of thought went into how characters occupy the frame, who stands where, who moves first, who holds their ground. These choices might seem small, but they contribute to the overall sense of power dynamics without needing explicit explanation. For example, when Mescal shares a scene with Denzel, there's a noticeable difference in how they use stillness. Mescal's stillness feels like observation. Denzel's stillness feels like control. And that contrast creates tension even before a single word is spoken. Similarly, when Pascal enters a scene, there's a grounded physicality that shifts the energy again. He feels anchored, like someone who belongs in the environment, even when the situation itself is unstable. These subtle differences in performance style help define relationships without relying solely on dialogue. And that's something not every film manages to achieve. It requires trust, both from the actors and from the direction guiding them. There's also a noticeable absence of exaggerated performances. No one feels like they're trying to steal scenes. Instead, there's a sense of collaboration, of actors responding to each other rather than competing. And that makes the interactions feel more natural, more believable, more aligned with the tone the film is aiming for. Even when emotions run high, the performances stay grounded. No one crosses into melodrama. No one pushes beyond what the moment requires. And that restraint actually makes the impact stronger. Because when something does break, when a character finally reaches a limit, it feels earned. It feels like the result of everything that's come before, not just a sudden spike in intensity. Another thing that stands out is how the cast handles silence. In a film with this kind of scale, it would be easy to rely heavily on dialogue to convey meaning. But here, silence plays a crucial role, and the actors understand that. They let moments breathe. They allow tension to build without filling every gap with words. And that creates a rhythm that feels more natural, more immersive. You're not being told what to feel, you're being given space to experience it, which, in a story driven by internal conflict as much as external action, becomes incredibly important. By the time you step back and look at the full cast, what you see isn't just a collection of strong performances. You see a system, a network of characters, each one influencing the others in different ways. Some directly, some indirectly, but all contributing to the overall movement of the story. And that's what makes the casting feel so effective. It's not just about who these actors are individually, it's about how they function together, how their differences create tension, how their interactions build complexity, how their choices shape the direction of the narrative. Because in a film like this, characters aren't isolated, they're connected, constantly affecting and being affected by the world around them. And the cast reflects that beautifully. Each performance adding something distinct, each presence serving a purpose, each interaction pushing the story forward in its own way. And when all of that comes together, it doesn't just support the film, it defines it. The film opens far from the heart of Rome, and that choice matters. Instead of immediately throwing you back into the Colosseum or the political core of the empire, it takes you somewhere quieter, more distant, almost disconnected. You're placed in a world that exists under Rome's shadow rather than inside its center. And right away, there's a different kind of tension. It's not about spectacle yet, it's about presence, influence, the quiet weight of an empire that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. This is where we meet the character played by Paul Mescal, and the film is incredibly deliberate about how it introduces him. There's no dramatic framing, no heroic buildup. He's just there, existing within his environment, shaped by it, but not defined in an obvious way. You get the sense that he's lived a life before this story begins, and that life has left marks. Not the kind you can point to directly, but the kind you feel in how he carries himself. There's a stillness to him. Not emptiness, stillness. Like someone who's always thinking a step ahead, even when there's no immediate threat. And that becomes important because it tells you early on that this isn't a character driven by impulse. He's observant, measured, aware. The inciting incident doesn't arrive as a sudden explosion. It creeps in. Rome's reach extends outward in a way that feels almost inevitable. Forces move in, not as chaotic invaders, but as an organized system asserting control. And what's striking is how the film portrays this expansion. It's not framed as heroic conquest. It's cold, efficient, almost procedural. Lives are disrupted, structures collapse, and Mescal's character is pulled into a situation he didn't choose. And here's where the tone of the film becomes clear. This isn't about a man seeking glory. It's about a man forced into survival. He's captured, displaced, and brought into the machinery of Rome, not as a participant, but as a resource. And the way the film handles this transition is key. It doesn't rush through it. It lets you feel the disorientation, the loss of control, the shift from having a life to being part of someone else's design. That's when the film starts introducing the inner workings of the empire itself. Not the grand, idealized version, but the operational one. You begin to see how people are categorized, processed, assigned value. There's a system behind everything, and it doesn't rely on chaos. It relies on order, on predictability, on control. And that's where Denzel Washington enters the picture. Not with noise, but with presence. His character isn't introduced as a traditional authority figure. He doesn't need to announce himself. Instead, the film lets you observe how others react to him. The way conversations shift when he's nearby. The way attention subtly redirects. You understand who he is, not because the film tells you, but because the world adjusts around him. He operates within the system, but not as a simple enforcer. He's something more complex, a facilitator, a strategist, someone who understands how the machinery works and knows how to move within it without drawing unnecessary attention. And when he notices Mescal's character, it's not framed as coincidence. It feels like recognition, not of who he is exactly, but of what he could become within the system. That's where the story begins to take on a different shape. Because instead of following a straightforward path of resistance, it starts exploring adaptation. Mescal's character isn't immediately rebellious. He observes, learns, adjusts. And that makes his journey far more interesting, because it's not driven by immediate defiance. It's driven by understanding. Meanwhile, the journey toward Rome itself becomes a transition not just in location, but in tone. The closer you get to the center, the more controlled everything feels, more structured, more calculated. By the time the Colosseum comes into view, it doesn't feel like a place of entertainment. It feels like an institution. And that's one of the film's smartest choices. It reframes the arena not as a symbol of glory, but as a tool. A mechanism for maintaining control, shaping perception, reinforcing power. What happens inside it isn't random, it's curated. And Mescal's character is about to become part of that, but not in the way you might expect. Because instead of immediately positioning him as a standout figure, the film places him among others. Fighters with their own histories, their own motivations, their own strategies for survival. And this environment becomes a microcosm of the larger system. Hierarchy exists even here. Power shifts constantly. Alliances form and dissolve without warning. And survival depends on more than just physical ability. This is where the film introduces another key presence, Pedro Pascal. His character exists closer to the structure of authority, but not entirely within it. There's a duality to him. He understands the system, operates within it, but there's a visible tension in how he engages with it. You get the sense that he's made choices in the past that have brought him here, and he's still living with them. His interactions with Mescal's character are subtle at first, observational, measured. But there's something there, a recognition that mirrors what Denzel's character sees, but from a different perspective. Where Denzel sees potential within the system, Pascal seems to see something more personal, something that doesn't fit as neatly into the structure. And that creates a quiet tension that builds over time. As the first arena sequences begin, the film doesn't treat them as climactic moments. They're introductions, demonstrations of how the system works. Fights are not just about survival, they're about messaging, about maintaining a certain narrative, about reinforcing the idea that everything is under control. But small cracks start to appear. Moments where outcomes don't align perfectly with expectations, where unpredictability slips in. And Mescal's character begins to contribute to that unpredictability, not through rebellion, but through presence, through decisions that don't fully align with the patterns others are used to. And that's when the attention around him starts to shift. Not dramatically, subtly, but enough to matter. By the time this first part of the story settles, you're no longer watching a simple rise from nothing arc. You're watching a system react to an anomaly. And that's what makes it compelling. Because the question isn't just what he will do next. It's how the world around him will respond when it realizes he doesn't behave the way it expects. As the story moves deeper into Rome's sphere, the stakes escalate, not through immediate violence alone, but through increasingly complex social dynamics and political pressures. The arena may be a physical stage, but by now, it functions as a reflection of every undercurrent shaping the empire. Every fight, every movement, every whisper has implications that ripple far beyond the Colosseum's walls. Mescal's character continues to evolve, and the brilliance of his arc lies in its subtlety. He is learning to interpret the system around him, not simply to survive, but to understand leverage. Every interaction, whether it's a glance, a gesture, or a carefully worded phrase, becomes a lesson in influence. It's fascinating to watch how someone previously operating on instinct begins to recognize patterns, anticipate reactions, and strategically place himself within them. By now, he's not just reacting to the world, he's beginning to shape it in minor, almost imperceptible ways. And those small shifts have massive implications for how the story unfolds. The interplay between Mescal and Denzel becomes more intricate in this part. Denzel's character, while remaining a figure of authority and strategic calculation, encounters moments of uncertainty that were absent in the opening sequences. The system he has mastered begins to show vulnerabilities, and the subtle tension between control and chaos intensifies. What's remarkable is how Denzel conveys this without overt displays of emotion. There are no dramatic outbursts, no theatrical gestures. It's the minutiae, a delayed response, a tightened gaze, the measured choice of words. These tiny shifts signal an awareness that control may no longer be absolute, which in turn amplifies suspense for the audience. Pascal's character simultaneously becomes more central, creating a triangular dynamic that drives much of the narrative tension. Where Denzel's authority represents systemic control, and Mescal's adaptation represents human potential within the system, Pascal's role embodies moral ambiguity and lived experience. His character has seen the consequences of Empire's machinations firsthand, and he navigates his environment with a combination of caution, insight, and pragmatism. Every choice he makes carries ethical weight, and that weight reverberates through the story. He's a reminder that history leaves traces on individuals, and that the past cannot be ignored when navigating power structures. In parallel, the film continues to explore the psychological impact of confinement and systemic manipulation. Characters who might have seemed straightforwardly brave or obedient begin to reveal cracks under pressure. The narrative doesn't treat fear or hesitation as weaknesses. They're presented as logical responses to an environment designed to destabilize. The arena sequences increasingly emphasize mental acuity over brute force. The audience comes to understand that survival in this world requires observation, patience, and the ability to exploit subtle opportunities. Mescal's calculated decisions during these sequences are as thrilling as physical confrontations, and they emphasize a theme rarely explored in large-scale epics: intelligence as a weapon. A significant narrative layer emerges in the interpersonal dynamics between the main trio and supporting characters. The film's minor characters are not window dressing. They contribute to an intricate web of trust, betrayal, and negotiation. Each relationship is carefully calibrated to affect the broader arc. When Mescal interacts with these peripheral figures, the consequences of his choices are tangible. The film avoids repeating earlier themes of straightforward loyalty versus treachery by framing relationships as fluid, ever-shifting, and context-dependent. This creates a sense of constant anticipation, as viewers cannot predict alliances or enmities based solely on first impressions. The arena itself evolves as a storytelling tool. Initially a locus for spectacle and demonstration, it transforms into a microcosm for strategic thinking. Physical confrontations are choreographed not merely for visual impact, but to illustrate hierarchical tensions and the subtleties of manipulation. The film rewards careful observation. The placement of individuals, the sequence of movements, and even the audience reactions within the story carry narrative significance. In one scene, a seemingly minor hesitation during combat triggers a cascading sequence that shifts multiple character trajectories. This kind of layered storytelling elevates the plot beyond typical action spectacle, emphasizing the consequences of small choices within a rigid system. Narrative tension is further enhanced by the film's use of pacing. The editing deliberately alternates between moments of intensity and quieter, reflective sequences. These interludes allow characters' internal processes to unfold, highlighting strategic thinking and psychological resilience. In one segment, Mescal's character observes a conflict from a distance, not as a bystander, but as a participant in a mental chess game. Each observation informs future decisions, and the audience is drawn into this cerebral layer of survival. The contrast between action-heavy scenes and contemplative sequences maintains narrative momentum, while deepening thematic complexity. The film also experiments with moral ambiguity in ways that feel sophisticated and unpredictable. Mescal's character is increasingly faced with choices that challenge conventional notions of right and wrong. Decisions are rarely presented as black or white. Rather, they're portrayed in shades of consequence and intent. Pascal's character often serves as a moral counterpoint, evaluating actions in the context of personal experience and long-term ramifications. The tension between pragmatism and principle is a recurring motif, giving the story philosophical depth without veering into lecture or exposition. Another noteworthy aspect is the political dimension of the narrative. Denzel's character doesn't just operate within a framework of authority, he manipulates it. The film carefully constructs scenarios in which perception and public opinion are as critical as physical control. Audiences see through his actions how a leader maintains dominance not only through fear or force, but by shaping narrative and expectation. This adds a level of sophistication to the plot, reinforcing the theme that power is as much about influence and narrative construction as it is about action. Simultaneously, personal stakes continue to rise. Relationships between the protagonists and their allies or rivals intensify, introducing conflicts that are emotional, psychological, and strategic. Moments of intimacy or trust carry weight precisely because they are fragile and conditional. The tension between personal loyalty and systemic necessity drives much of the drama, and it adds texture that distinguishes the film from conventional action-oriented epics. Part 2 also explores the evolving sense of identity among the characters. Mescal's journey is particularly compelling here, as he reconciles his personal values with the realities of a system designed to dehumanize. The film emphasizes that survival often requires compromise, and these compromises shape identity in profound ways. Pascal's character, conversely, is portrayed as someone navigating internal conflict rooted in past experiences, demonstrating how previous choices cast long shadows over present circumstances. Even Denzel's character, despite his mastery, encounters moments that reveal vulnerability in perception, judgment, and influence. The climax of Part 2 builds from these cumulative tensions. The film orchestrates multiple converging threads: arena battles, political machinations, and personal confrontations, without allowing any single thread to dominate. Each event has ramifications across the narrative network, emphasizing interconnectedness. The story resists the temptation to resolve conflicts neatly. Instead, it underscores the ripple effects of each action, reinforcing the film's commitment to realism within its epic framework. The cinematography in this section complements the narrative depth. Close-up shots capture micro-expressions, subtle gestures, and fleeting interactions that communicate as much as dialogue. Wide shots contextualize characters within vast, imposing environments, reinforcing themes of scale, influence, and individual agency. Lighting and color schemes reflect mood shifts, oscillating between warmth in moments of human connection and stark contrast during sequences of tension or confrontation. Sound design and score also play a critical narrative role. Subtle auditory cues indicate shifts in power, foreshadow impending conflict, or highlight psychological tension. Music is sparing but deliberate, creating rhythm and emotional texture that complements the unfolding plot. The combination of visual and auditory design reinforces thematic content without over-explanation, allowing viewers to experience tension and consequence organically. Finally, Part 2 emphasizes consequence and unpredictability. The story acknowledges that systems, even rigid ones, are vulnerable to anomalies. Mescal's character embodies this anomaly, as his presence, choices, and evolving understanding introduce instability. The narrative stakes are compounded because unpredictability affects multiple axes: physical survival, political stability, and personal morality. The audience experiences suspense not through contrived twists, but through the accumulation of tension and anticipation generated by interconnected character actions. By the end of Part 2, the audience understands that the stakes are multidimensional. Survival is intertwined with ethical decisions, systemic forces, and interpersonal dynamics. Every choice resonates beyond its immediate effect, shaping outcomes in ways that are both dramatic and psychologically credible. The narrative's sophistication emerges from its layered approach, balancing action with strategy, spectacle with subtlety, and historical grounding with character-driven insight. The review of this section emphasizes that the film succeeds because it trusts the audience. It does not spell out every implication, nor does it rely on sensationalism. Instead, it invites engagement, observation, and analysis. Characters are complex, systems are intricate, and consequences are realistic. This approach elevates the film above conventional sequels and action epics, delivering a story that is intellectually and emotionally engaging while retaining cinematic grandeur. By the time the story moves into its final third, the stakes have intensified to a point where both the physical and psychological dimensions of the film converge. The narrative no longer separates action from strategy. Every confrontation carries multiple layers of consequence. Mescal's character, who began as an observer, is now fully embedded in the system, and yet he's no longer merely reacting, he's initiating. Every decision, from subtle verbal cues to decisive movements in combat, serves a dual purpose: immediate survival and long-term leverage within the socio-political structure of Rome. The arena sequences in this section are particularly notable. They are choreographed not merely for spectacle, but to illustrate character development and relational tension. Every participant's positioning, every feint and parry, carries narrative significance. Mescal's performance shines here because he communicates as much through posture and timing as he does through dialogue. He doesn't dominate through brute force, but through awareness. Every glance toward an opponent or ally signals cognition, anticipation, and strategy. This nuanced approach elevates the fight scenes, making them as intellectually compelling as they are visually striking. Denzel's character remains the linchpin of authority and control, but by this stage, cracks have appeared in his command. Subtle moments, hesitation before issuing orders, micro-expressions of doubt, or the strategic recalibration in dialogue, signal that his previously unassailable position is being challenged. These cracks are not dramatic eruptions, but quiet indicators of vulnerability. The brilliance lies in how the audience recognizes them. The more controlled his exterior remains, the more potent the tension becomes. It's a masterclass in restraint, reminding viewers that power is often most fragile when it appears strongest. Pascal's character undergoes a parallel transformation. While initially more of a calculated survivor, he now faces moral and strategic dilemmas that force him to question his own alignment within the system. His interactions with Mescal are particularly compelling in these sequences. They reflect mutual recognition, not just of each other's skill or intelligence, but of the consequences their decisions impose on everyone around them. Their dynamic becomes a central narrative driver, highlighting the tension between pragmatism, morality, and self-preservation in a world designed to minimize personal autonomy. Supporting characters continue to play critical roles in shaping the climax. Each minor character's decision, allegiance, and reaction now directly affects the main narrative trajectory. These interactions are never redundant. They each introduce a unique variable that can tip the balance, forcing the main characters to adapt in real time. The narrative treats the ensemble as a living network, emphasizing the interconnectedness of every choice, word, and movement. This systemic approach avoids melodrama while maintaining suspense, illustrating that outcomes are the product of complex, interwoven forces rather than isolated events. As the plot escalates toward its apex, the film's pacing shifts dynamically. Short, rapid cuts highlight immediate threats, physical confrontations, and rapid-fire strategic adjustments, creating tension and urgency. In contrast, slower sequences emphasize contemplation, reaction, and psychological strategy, allowing viewers to internalize the stakes and consequences. This careful modulation of tempo ensures that the climax resonates on multiple levels. It is both viscerally exciting and intellectually satisfying. The final arena confrontation serves as a narrative fulcrum, blending spectacle with thematic depth. Mescal is no longer an outsider. He navigates the complex power dynamics with precision. Denzel's authority is tested directly, revealing that even the most structured systems are vulnerable to intelligent disruption. Pascal's ethical and experiential perspective adds complexity to the confrontation, ensuring that it is neither straightforward nor predictable. These sequences avoid cliches of hero-villain resolution, instead emphasizing that outcomes are contingent, nuanced, and sometimes morally ambiguous. One of the film's strengths is its refusal to simplify conflict into binary terms. Characters are neither purely virtuous nor purely malevolent. Mescal's tactical brilliance is coupled with ethical questioning. Denzel's strategic authority is tempered by the unpredictability of human behavior. Pascal's moral reasoning is complicated by survival instincts. This multidimensional portrayal reflects a sophisticated understanding of human psychology and organizational dynamics, offering a narrative depth rarely achieved in high-profile sequels. Parallel to the arena action, the political machinations of Rome are resolved in a way that underscores systemic themes. Power transitions, manipulations, and influence strategies are executed with calculated precision. The film ensures that these developments feel consequential, showing how decisions in one sphere, whether in combat, alliance, or dialogue, affect larger socio-political outcomes. Unlike conventional epics, which often treat political resolutions as background exposition, this film weaves them into the narrative's emotional and strategic fabric. The resolution is deliberately complex. While some storylines reach closure, others are left open-ended to reflect the ongoing nature of power, influence, and legacy. Mescal's character emerges changed, not because he conquered or triumphed in a conventional sense, but because he navigated a system and adapted in ways that ensure continued agency. Denzel's character, though challenged, maintains authority in modified form, demonstrating that power is dynamic rather than absolute. Pascal's character achieves a nuanced balance, reflecting personal growth tempered by ethical and strategic constraints. The ensemble cast ensures that the resolution is multifaceted, providing both satisfaction and reflection without oversimplification. From a review perspective, this film distinguishes itself in several ways. First, The character-driven approach elevates it above standard sequels, ensuring that the audience is engaged with internal conflicts as much as external spectacle. The narrative's intellectual rigor is matched by its visual design, with cinematography, set design, and costuming all reinforcing thematic intent. Every visual element contributes to narrative comprehension, from the layout of the arena to the framing of private interactions, emphasizing hierarchy, tension, and consequence. Second, the performances are uniformly exceptional. Mescal's subtle internalization of strategy and survival contrasts beautifully with Denzel's controlled authority and Pascal's ethically complex pragmatism. Supporting actors reinforce these dynamics, ensuring that tension permeates even minor interactions. The result is a living, breathing narrative ecosystem, rather than a linear tale of heroism and villainy. Third, the film's thematic ambition is notable. It explores power, morality, survival, and legacy in ways that resonate beyond the immediate narrative. The audience is prompted to consider not only what the characters do, but why systems operate as they do, and how individuals navigate these structures with limited autonomy. This philosophical undercurrent adds weight to the spectacle and ensures that emotional engagement is matched by intellectual investment. Finally, the resolution delivers a payoff that is both thrilling and contemplative. Climax and denouement are intricately linked, ensuring that physical confrontation, ethical tension, and strategic maneuvering are all integrated. The audience experiences closure without feeling manipulated. Outcomes are earned, organic, and consistent with established character and systemic dynamics. Unlike conventional blockbusters, which often rely on superficial catharsis, this film achieves emotional resonance through narrative integrity and character realism. In sum, the final part of the story demonstrates the film's ability to balance epic scope with intimate psychological and strategic nuance. It avoids repetition by treating resolution, power, and consequence in multidimensional terms. Each character's arc is resolved on its own terms, while the systemic and political implications provide additional narrative texture. The film's sophistication lies in its refusal to oversimplify conflict or character motivation, delivering a complex, immersive, and intellectually satisfying cinematic experience. The review conclusion emphasizes that this is not merely a spectacle-driven sequel. It's a study of interaction, consequence, and adaptation within a highly structured environment. Its success rests on the actor's ability to convey nuanced decision-making, the director's skill in orchestrating tension across multiple narrative layers, and the writer's attention to ethical and strategic complexity. The result is a film that rewards careful viewing, encourages reflection, and succeeds as both a continuation of a beloved franchise and a standalone exploration of human agency within systemic constraints. By blending visceral action, psychological realism, and political intrigue, the film delivers a cinematic experience that is both thrilling and thought-provoking. Its treatment of power, identity, and consequence makes it a standout among contemporary epics. It's a story that lingers after viewing, prompting the audience to consider how individuals navigate complex systems, the cost of adaptation, and the interplay between morality, strategy, and survival. The timing of Gladiator II's release is strategic, calculated not just in terms of calendar placement, but in terms of audience psychology and industry trends. Dropping a sequel to a film as iconic as the original Gladiator carries weight and expectation, and the studio was acutely aware that the release date would set the tone for how both casual viewers and hardcore fans approached the film. By positioning it in the later quarter of 2024, they tapped into a moment when blockbuster audiences are recalibrating between summer-heavy action releases and the more awards-conscious films of fall. This window allows the film to capitalize on momentum without being overshadowed by a summer crush of superhero franchises or other tentpole offerings. Moreover, the release timing reflects a subtle understanding of nostalgia's power in modern cinema. Audiences who were deeply invested in the original Gladiator are now well into adulthood, and the marketing and release strategy aims to intersect with that demographic. They are likely seeking both cinematic spectacle and the emotional resonance of continuity. By releasing at a moment when theater attendance is stabilizing post-pandemic and streaming services continue to diversify viewing habits, the studio maximizes its potential audience, both in theaters and through ancillary markets. From an industry context perspective, Gladiator II occupies a unique position. It is a sequel to a nearly 25-year-old franchise, which in Hollywood terms is both a risk and an opportunity. Sequels that appear decades after the original often face the dual challenge of honoring the source material while remaining relevant to contemporary audiences. Here, the film's strategy leverages the enduring cultural memory of Ridley Scott's original, while updating its sensibilities, psychologically, ethically, and visually, for a 2024 audience. The result is a bridge between generations, appealing to fans who remember the first film, while attracting viewers attuned to modern storytelling conventions. The studio also made strategic decisions in terms of distribution channels. Unlike mid-tier releases that might rely primarily on digital platforms, this film was designed with a global theatrical rollout in mind. High-profile markets such as North America, Europe, and Asia were prioritized to ensure box office impact and cultural conversation momentum. Meanwhile, the marketing campaign emphasized both scale and intimacy, highlighting epic action sequences while foregrounding the nuanced character dynamics that define the story. This dual approach positions the film as both a visual spectacle and a substantive narrative, appealing to critics and mass audiences alike. Industry analysts have noted that the film's release coincides with a period of heightened competition in the historical epic genre. Other studios have been exploring narratives that blend political intrigue, personal drama, and period aesthetics. By entering the market at this moment, Gladiator II asserts itself as a benchmark for quality in the genre, leveraging both its franchise legacy and contemporary cinematic techniques. Its timing allows it to define audience expectations for epic historical storytelling in a market that is increasingly fragmented by streaming and niche offerings. The decision to release globally, rather than staggering regional launches, reflects lessons learned from other tentpole films over the past decade. With piracy and social media spoilers ever present, simultaneous release minimizes revenue leakage and maximizes initial cultural impact. This approach also benefits marketing synergy, allowing social campaigns, influencer partnerships, and critical discourse to peak collectively rather than in isolated waves. The studio's marketing team has orchestrated trailers, teasers, and featurettes that carefully balance character-focused storytelling with visual spectacle, ensuring that awareness is high without oversaturating potential audiences. Box office projections also play a crucial role in contextualizing the release. Analysts expected that the combination of nostalgic appeal, high-caliber casting, and contemporary narrative complexity would drive strong ticket sales in domestic and international markets. The studio capitalized on this potential by staggering premium format screenings, IMAX, Dolby Cinema, and 4DX, aligning the physical experience with the grandeur and intensity of the narrative. These formats enhance audience immersion, turning sequences of strategic combat, political intrigue, and arena spectacle into experiences that extend beyond visual storytelling alone. Another significant consideration in the release strategy is critical reception. By positioning the film during a period conducive to awards consideration, albeit not in direct competition with more traditional fall dramas, the studio enhances its potential cultural impact. Early festival screenings, critic previews, and selective press access were orchestrated to ensure that professional discourse focused on the film's narrative depth, performance quality, and cinematic craftsmanship. Positive critical momentum not only reinforces audience anticipation, but also elevates the film's reputation within an increasingly crowded marketplace. The industry context is further enriched by the broader trend of adult-oriented, high-production value sequels. Studios are increasingly recognizing that audiences desire more than spectacle. They want thoughtful character arcs, moral complexity, and psychological realism within expansive settings. Gladiator II exemplifies this trend, signaling that epic storytelling need not sacrifice narrative sophistication for visual grandeur. By combining mature themes with blockbuster-scale execution, the film positions itself at the intersection of prestige and mass appeal. Moreover, the casting choices play a subtle but influential role in the film's market positioning. Paul Mescal, known for emotionally nuanced performances, appeals to younger audiences and cinephiles seeking depth. Denzel Washington brings cross-generational credibility, combining cultural gravitas with mainstream recognition. Pedro Pascal appeals to fans of contemporary serialized storytelling and genre work. Together, they form a triad of actors that bridges fan bases while reinforcing the film's narrative and thematic intentions. From an industry perspective, such casting ensures multi-layered market penetration, enhancing both domestic and international draw. Marketing and promotional strategies were carefully calibrated to leverage these dynamics. Teasers highlighted the psychological and moral stakes, while full-length trailers emphasized both spectacle and the evolving character relationships. Strategic appearances on talk shows, podcasts, and high-profile media outlets reinforced the film's dual appeal. It is both an epic narrative and a study in human complexity. Social media campaigns highlighted behind-the-scenes production insights, training regimens for actors, and the historical authenticity of sets and costumes, enhancing perceived value and audience engagement. Another element of the release strategy involves digital and streaming synergy. While the primary focus is theatrical performance, pre-arranged streaming windows and post-theatrical distribution plans ensure long-term revenue sustainability. These plans accommodate changing consumption patterns, particularly among younger viewers, without undermining the theatrical event. By integrating streaming considerations into the initial release calculus, the studio ensures that the film maintains cultural relevance and accessibility beyond its first theatrical run. International market dynamics further inform the release context. Historical epics often perform well in territories with cultural appreciation for grand narratives, but the studio has also positioned the film to appeal to emerging markets, where large-scale productions are increasingly embraced. Localization strategies, including dubbing, subtitling, and region-specific marketing campaigns, ensure that the story resonates cross-culturally. This global awareness reflects a sophisticated understanding of modern cinematic economics, where box office success is as dependent on international performance as domestic reception. The industry significance of Gladiator II also lies in its potential influence on subsequent franchise development. A successful launch reinforces confidence in long-delayed sequels, adult-oriented epics, and complex ensemble storytelling. It demonstrates that audiences are receptive to films that respect their intelligence while delivering spectacle. The combination of strategic release timing, high-caliber casting, narrative depth, and immersive technical execution serves as a case study in aligning creative ambition with commercial strategy. Finally, from a historical context perspective, the film's release marks an intersection of cinematic nostalgia, contemporary audience expectation, and industry trend evolution. It not only builds upon the legacy of the original Gladiator, but also engages with current conversations about complexity, character-driven spectacle, and systemically interconnected narratives. The timing ensures relevance, maximizes exposure, and positions the film as a cultural and industry touchstone. In summary, the release date and industry context reflect a meticulously orchestrated strategy. The late 2024 timing leverages both nostalgia and contemporary audience patterns. The global rollout maximizes impact while minimizing market risks. The marketing campaign balances spectacle and depth. The distribution strategy integrates theatrical, premium format, and streaming considerations. And the film's placement within broader industry trends positions it as a benchmark for narrative sophistication within the epic genre. By the end of this chapter, it's clear that Gladiator II was not released arbitrarily. Its timing, strategy, and contextual positioning demonstrate a deep understanding of both market forces and audience psychology, ensuring that the film enters the cultural landscape with maximum resonance and impact. The brilliance of Gladiator II owes as much to its story as it does to the ensemble cast, which is carefully constructed to balance legacy, fresh talent, and complex characterization. Each performer was selected not merely for star power, but for how their energy interacts with the story's intricate web of strategy, morality, and survival. Paul Mescal anchors the narrative as the central character. His role is that of a figure who must navigate a labyrinthine system while retaining a sense of personal agency. Unlike traditional protagonists in epics, Mescal's character doesn't dominate through brute strength or outward heroics. Instead, he exerts influence through observation, calculated decision-making, and subtle social maneuvering. His performance is defined by micro-expressions and the way he physically occupies space. A slight hesitation, a measured glance, or a shift in posture conveys far more about his thought process than dialogue could. Mescal embodies a character in transition, from someone reactive to someone strategically proactive, representing the central theme of adaptation within rigid structures. Denzel Washington delivers a performance layered with authority and psychological complexity. He plays a figure of control and institutional mastery, whose presence alone can reorient a room or a scene. But his character is not monolithic. Washington subtly conveys moments of internal conflict and awareness that the system he commands is not infallible. Through tonal shifts, controlled gestures, and carefully modulated dialogue, he portrays a leader whose power is earned and constantly negotiated, rather than simply inherent. The audience senses both the stability and fragility in his position, which heightens the dramatic tension whenever he and Mescal interact. Pedro Pascal brings a different texture to the ensemble, portraying a character who operates in the gray zones of morality and strategy. Pascal's character embodies experience, pragmatism, and ethical nuance. Unlike the purely authoritative figure or the emerging protagonist, he is someone whose history informs his decision-making in complex ways. His interactions with Mescal create a dynamic of mentorship, challenge, and occasional tension, while his exchanges with Denzel's character reflect subtle negotiations of loyalty, intent, and power. Pascal's performance is remarkable in its restraint. He communicates influence without domination, creating layered interpersonal dynamics that enrich the narrative. Supporting characters further amplify the story's richness. Fred Heckinger introduces an unpredictable element within the system. His character disrupts established hierarchies through controlled chaos, forcing main characters to adapt. Unlike the other actors, Heckinger's approach relies on unpredictability, making the viewer question motives and anticipate outcomes that are never immediately apparent. This unpredictability injects a sense of realism into the world. In complex systems, not all variables are known or controllable, and Heckinger's presence underscores that truth. Lior Raz contributes grounded intensity. His character provides a human lens through which the audience experiences the consequences of Empire's systemic pressures. Raz portrays someone whose life experience has honed acute awareness, strategic patience, and adaptive behavior. The character's physical presence and subtle reactions suggest a history of navigating similar power structures, emphasizing the narrative's focus on observation, strategy, and psychological resilience rather than mere spectacle. Derek Jacobi adds gravitas and historical authenticity. His character reflects continuity within the system, grounding the story in a sense of institutional memory. Jacobi's experience with historical and classical material enhances the believability of his role, and his performance conveys wisdom and nuance without overshadowing the younger actors. He represents the weight of tradition and precedent, serving as a counterbalance to characters whose energies are defined by adaptability, strategy, and moral ambiguity. May Calamawy provides an emotional anchor within the narrative. Her character introduces perspective, empathy, and relational depth, reminding the audience that personal stakes extend beyond survival and power dynamics. Calamawy's performance communicates subtle reactions to systemic injustice and moral tension, offering a humanizing lens for the audience to engage with the broader consequences of the Empire's structures. Her interactions with Mescal and Pascal highlight relational complexity and underscore the narrative's exploration of personal agency amid institutional constraints. The ensemble is rounded out by a collection of minor characters who each serve purposeful roles in advancing both plot and theme. Every ally, rival, or peripheral figure introduces a variable within the system, reflecting the film's commitment to realism in depicting hierarchies and power dynamics. Background characters are not mere scenery. Their decisions and interactions influence main characters' trajectories, demonstrating the interconnectedness of actions within complex social and political frameworks. Physicality and presence are integral to character portrayal in this film. Actors are choreographed not just in combat sequences, but in how they inhabit shared space. Who stands where, who moves first, and who yields subtly communicates relational hierarchies and psychological tension. These choices amplify narrative depth without relying on expository dialogue. Mescal's stillness, Denzel's commanding posture, Pascal's measured movement, and the ensemble's responsive adjustments collectively create a visual language that conveys strategy, power, and anticipation. The film's character dynamics are built on a foundation of contrast. Mescal represents calculated adaptability, Denzel embodies institutional authority, and Pascal explores ethical pragmatism. Supporting actors introduce unpredictability, grounded intensity, tradition, and emotional resonance. These contrasting energies prevent monotony, ensuring that each interaction is meaningful and consequential. They also reinforce thematic content. Survival, morality, influence, and systemic navigation are explored not only through plot, but through nuanced interpersonal behavior. Cultural and generational factors inform casting decisions and character interpretation. Mescal appeals to younger audiences attuned to nuanced performance and subtle psychological tension, while Denzel provides cross-generational credibility. Pascal brings contemporary genre experience and a sense of tactical realism. Heckinger, Raz, Jacoby, and Kalamawi enrich the narrative with additional cultural, historical, and emotional layers. Collectively, the cast reflects an understanding of audience segmentation, ensuring broad appeal while maintaining narrative integrity. Voice, cadence, and tonal variation are significant in character portrayal. Washington's measured diction conveys authority tempered by awareness, while Mescal's inflections reflect observation and contemplation. Pascal's modulated speech communicates deliberation and moral complexity. Supporting characters' vocal patterns complement these approaches, creating a layered auditory landscape that reinforces hierarchy, tension, and psychological depth. These subtle variations in delivery ensure that dialogue communicates more than content. It conveys relational dynamics, internal reasoning, and strategic positioning. The depth of characterization extends to ethical and psychological dimensions. Mescal's growth demonstrates adaptive intelligence under duress. Denzel's authority is informed by experience, perception, and negotiation, rather than raw power. Pascal's pragmatism grapples with moral and systemic consequences. Supporting actors explore unpredictability, history, resilience, and empathy. Together, these characterizations examine human behavior under complex pressures, presenting a rich tapestry of psychological realism rarely achieved in large-scale epics. Costuming, set design, and physical movement further reinforce character identity. Mescal's subtle shifts in posture, choice of stance, and interaction with props reflect strategic awareness. Denzel's formal movements and attire signal authority and control. Pascal's utilitarian approach communicates experience and practical adaptability. Even minor characters' physical presentation communicates role, hierarchy, and intention. The film's attention to these details ensures that character identity is reinforced visually as well as narratively. Relationships among characters evolve dynamically, resisting static definitions. Alliances form and dissolve, trust is negotiated, and moral dilemmas shift interpersonal dynamics. Mescal's interactions with Pascal explore mentorship and challenge, while Denzel's responses to emerging variables highlight systemic tension. Supporting characters' behaviors impact these interactions, creating a continuously evolving relational network. This fluidity ensures that characterization remains fresh throughout the narrative, with each scene providing new insights and consequences. By the end of the story, every main and supporting character has undergone significant evolution. Mescal achieves strategic self-determination, Denzel maintains adapted authority, and Pascal reconciles pragmatic and ethical considerations. Supporting characters either influence these outcomes or illustrate systemic consequences. Collectively, the ensemble demonstrates that narrative impact is a function of interdependence, not isolated action. The cast's cohesion and contrasting energies are essential to the film's resonance and enduring appeal.